Hey, Gavin.
Hey, Louie. I saw people don't see the beforehand, but you just did like a full leg up. I need those kicks higher.
I was sitting like, a Tish freshman in a chair, and I need to sit like a businessman, okay?
Yes, exactly.
I need to succeed in business without really trying. And now I'm going to show listeners, I told Gavin there was a little surprise, and it's my drink glass, and it's this little bare-bottomed stripper boy. I thought the
PG-13.
I thought the vibe was appropriate for today's topic.
Yes.
Which I'm very excited for. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mixed Reviews.
We are a film podcast where we take a film subject such as an actor, director, or a mini genre. We take an entire month. We do as much research as we can. Books, movies, podcasts, you name it. Lots of interviews on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And we take all that information, we condense it down and give it back to you. And then we tell you what we like and what we don't like.
The reviews are, in fact, mixed. And we have a lot of fun. Watch as many movies as we can.
And speaking of a lot of fun, I would like to mention that the Mixed Reviews is a proud part of the Glitterjaw Queer Podcast Collective, which runs the gamut of podcasting media. You can find out more information about Glitterjaw at glitterjaw.com.
I thought you were going to say they run the gay media mafia.
Oh, they do.
And I was like, don't tell them that. That's the secret, actually, that cannot get out. There is a secret handshake, and it's sexy.
I was going to say handshake.
Gavin, please. Our viewers, my mother. Not viewers, listeners. Okay.
Some people on the Patreon, some people watch us.
That's true.
And thank you for being the two that do. We love you, and I can see exactly who you are. So,
we have some old business before we get into our new. This episode. First, our last episode was all about Ray Fine. What a man, what a mighty good man.
Oh my God, yeah.
We asked you guys to go to our Twitter.
Which will soon be dead, probably.
Yes, which will soon be dead, probably. I don't know how we will do polls in the future, but we'll figure it out. I don't know, maybe we just talk on Blue Sky about it. Who cares? To vote for your favorite Ray Fiennes movie, I had such trouble figuring out what to put on there. So I put other, and then no one said what their other was.
I know. And I had immediately, I was at Death Becomes Her. I saw you put the poll up and I saw that other was winning already. And I was like, nobody has responded.
I know. So you guys flopped on that, but here are the results. In last place was my pick, Quiz Show with 15%. Other came in at third place with 19%. Gavin's pick, A Bigger Splash, second place with 31%. Who knew?
Look at me making a big splash.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the winner. Trust me, if you see me in person, you would understand. You get it. You're like, yeah, that's a cannonball.
And then in first place was The English Patient with 35%. I wouldn't say The English Patient is a fun watch, but it is beautiful. She's beautiful.
And he gets it's a really good dual role. And by dual role, I mean he's playing the same person, but, he has to spend so much time under all that makeup in bed, old, burned, and then young and lively. And
the first half, he's just English, and the second half, he's a patient. So it's a lot going on.
That's really how it breaks down. It is one half to one half. Yeah, exactly.
Listen, I watch movies. I know movies. God, I hate that. I was just in a Donald Trump cadence just then.
I didn't hear it until you said it, and now I hear it. Yeah.
Ew.
Ooh.
Ew.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault that man talks like a second grader. And so anytime you say anything that sounds like that, it just kind of falls into that realm.
Yeah. We have other old business, right, Gavin?
Yes, absolutely. We got an email. I love getting an email. And if you want to email us, you can always email us at reviewsmixed@gmail.com. This lovely email is from Della. And she said, guys, thanks so much for the Rafe rundown. Very enjoyable and LOL in parts as always. One movie I was waiting for you to talk about was this one, Pick Attached. And it's a picture of the movie poster of Bernard and Doris. And she said, but did you see it? It's so sweet and lovely and somehow veers off sugary where it could have become obnoxious. Cheers from Sydney, Della. First, thank you, Della. Please send us emails. I love getting emails, and I emailed her back hey, we're gonna read this we'll answer this on the show. Thank you so much.
I started watching Bernard and Doris, and then I realized it was a TV film.
Yes.
And so I was like, oh, there's so much to get through. I don't know that I'm gonna commit to watching this, even though I was like charmed that it's Susan Sarandon
Right.
also like starring up opposite Rafe. So, so I didn't watch. I'm so sorry, Della.
I did, specifically because even though it was a TV movie, I saw that it was directed by character actor Bob Balaban, and I was like,
Oh,
huh?
well,
And yeah. And in the film, and this is just quick because we're not really here to talk about Rafe anymore. We're gonna done and dust him in a moment. But it's a movie about Doris Duke, who is played by Susan Sarandon, and she was a philanthropist and a socialite heiress, and her Irish butler Bernard Lafferty, who is Ray Fiennes, comes into her life, kind of cons his way into her life, and then the funny thing is it, as Della said, it becomes very sweet. It becomes this very like back and forth of the relationship. She really helps him with his addiction issues because he's an alcoholic, and he sort of helps her like reconnect with normal people because she's a very rich woman who just lives kind of like on the whim of whatever. Like she's very much one of those, like, she's fucking her piano teacher, but then she's also like, you can't fuck other people. That's only me. I'm the rich person. So get out the moment he starts sleeping with somebody else.
you know what? I really connect with that actually.
Yeah.
It's just-
But I will say, I know how demented you are.
yeah. Mhm.
I will say, you get to the end of that movie without giving too much away, it actually kind of becomes kind of sinister, and there's some
I don't know.
filmic accusations that are made, and admittedly, like, this is a semi-fictionalized account of the relationship, but I was like, oh, like, this is a little bit of like the evil queer narrative, because he plays like he is a gay man in the movie, and I was like, very, I don't know, it's a very interesting, and I'm assuming very polarizing ending, because I think like you can read it one of two ways, and one is like a really like, oh no, and one is a really like interesting sort of way. But yeah, I really, yeah, I liked it. And but like you said, TV movie, we don't always cover, I like that I hit my camera when I did that, we don't always cover TV movies when we do this show, just because like there's, especially when it comes to doing one person singular filmic legacy, we like to stick to theatrical releases.
Well,
but
especially if it's like, if it's someone who has a lot to get through, like if it was
Yes.
someone who, you know, there wasn't a lot, and so we'll
like,
go there.
When we did our Dolly Parton episode, that was for the holidays, you
Or
know,
if-
her bread and butter is TV. So
Yeah. Or if, you know, there's something like that's very specific or that's significant, like Emma Thompson, like she has that very
Yes,
incredible
wit.
film. Yeah. Like, so yes. But Dela, thank you so much for shouting us out and putting us onto that. And thank you for your kind email. And for listening. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Officially, we are closing the book on Ray Fiennes.
I
thank you.
imagine his book is like a big, like leather bound, like dusky, oaky. Yeah, exactly. They very that. Smells a little of like whiskey and like,
yeah. Oh,
yeah.
100%. But like handsome.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this episode is our last episode of the year. Every year since we started this, we've tried to have a little holiday whimsy for
Yes.
the end of the year, a little something cozy. And I have for years now also been bothering Gavin to do this topic. We are
Which
doing
I still think is too expansive, but whatever. I'm letting
Yeah.
you, I'm giving you this gift this
Thank
holiday
you.
season.
And this year,
So-
I'm receiving all the gifts. Gavin is right, though. We're talking today about movie musicals, but with an enormous asterisk on it,
Yes.
which is going to make the rewind a little bit tricky and difficult. And I'm sure like maybe will annoy some people because we're not talking about all movie musicals. We
Right.
decided going into this, we were only going to do adaptations of theater shows. So there's going to be some things that are like really excellent movie musicals that we're not going to talk about. We're not going to talk about Singing in the Rain because Singing in the Rain
Right.
is an amazing movie musical that was
maybe
made.
the best movie musical ever. But
Yeah.
it's funny because that was also my go-to, was like Singing in the Rain did not start out as a stage adaptation. So sorry.
Correct. So yeah, that was made specifically as a film, but obviously it's musical. Like what are other things that we're not going to talk about? Like I realized Funny Face, which we did for our Audrey Hepburn thing. It is a stage musical, but the film version is completely different. It's not an adaptation.
Jettisons, yes.
Yeah, so we're not going to be talking about that. Mamma Mia 2.
Right.
No. Mamma Mia 1? Yes.
Yes. Grease? Yes. Grease
yes.
2? No.
No.
Sadly.
So there's a lot. If we're, and we'll probably mention some things that are like Moulin Rouge.
Yes.
No, because that was a movie first, then came to Broadway. There's a lot of stuff like that where movies were made and then went to Broadway or the West End or where the fuck ever. We're not going to be talking about that. We're going to be only talking about started off as a stage show, could have been anywhere because a lot of these didn't start off on Broadway. Maybe
exactly
regional stuff, West End, California, wherever the fuck. As long as it was a show first and then became a movie, we will be attempting to include all of that in this episode. But I just thought, musicals for a long time have had this kind of holiday spirit, cheeriness.
Right.
Obviously, we're in a Wicked moment. I don't even think that came into our decision. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, I think it just sort of lined up in a way that kind of intersected with our plans.
It just kind of also though emphasizes the thesis of the holidays are a time for musicals. I think last year the big musical was The Color Purple, which we talked about last year. There's just a lot there. Oh, also part of this, we're not going to be talking about all the Disney musicals, like Aladdin, Lion King. Those did become Broadway shows, but again, those are not adaptations from stage shows. So just so we're clear, no one get mad. We're gonna have a good time talking about musicals, and I'm excited. I didn't get to see a ton because there truly is a ton.
I saw 26 movies for the first time. Well, not all for the first time, but specifically for this episode. I've also seen a lot of movie adaptations for movie musicals. And if you're thinking to yourself, 26 doesn't sound like a lot, also know that we only have a month to do this, and we're also doing other things, and that's almost a movie a night. And also, musicals are fucking long. They're very long. They're always so long.
I know there have been days previously during this project where I'm I can watch 3 movies in a day, whatever.
Yeah.
Can't do that with a musical. That's 3 hours. Absolutely not. The Sound of Music has a full ass intermission, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, Devin, I want to start by asking you, do you remember the first musical you ever watched, adaptation or not?
Oh God. I mean, there's always the Disney stuff. There is always the Disney stuff. Just that, but I think maybe the first one I ever saw might be Oklahoma, might be the big, huge format, even though it was on TV. But that's sort of how it's meant to be seen, incredibly letterboxed and whatnot. And I think I saw it on the Family Channel, which preceded Fox Family Channel, which preceded ABC Family Channel, which preceded Freeform. Yes, exactly. And we taped it off TV. I was heading into I'm sure. Well, I don't know. Actually, sidebar. My dad showed me Rocky Horror when I was 7.
Whoa.
So maybe Rocky Horror. But
that's a choice.
Yeah,
it's very informative of who you are, Gavin.
What are you talking about? I don't understand.
A Rocky Horror Oklahoma mix. That feels too correct.
That is the energy I give off. But I was headed into junior high, and at the time, they were creating a new theater department because they're just really are not theater department, but a high school musical sort of, because it was a department that hadn't really existed in my hometown for a while. And so I went and I tried out for our first musical as a 7th grader, and that was Annie. And so I did see the movie Annie as well. Which is a weird fucking movie because they were what if we took the stage musical but added in more racism? And it's what are you doing, John Huston? Yeah, and so that, I think that sort of is when I think of the movie musical, I think of all the musicals I did in high school. We did Annie, Hello Dolly, in which I was Barnaby Tucker, The Music Man, Fiddler on the Roof, Oklahoma, where I was Allie Hackham. Terrible casting. Do not cast me as a Persian man. And
well, he's a fake Persian.
He's a fake Persian. Yeah.
I believe he's fake Persian.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I think that's probably true, but also like,
It's okay,
my,
Devin. I release you of your white guilt. You
thank
can be
you.
Ali. You can be Ali Hakim.
Yeah, you don't want to hear the accent I used. And and Guys and Dolls, and so
Wow.
like I think the funny thing is about this doing this specific project, I was like, oh, you've awakened the like inner theater bitch in me, and
Oh,
now
she's
and
always been there.
yeah, exactly, and she's just been dormant, and now I'm
Mm-hmm.
like. I'm ready to give you my opinion on some of these.
Yeah.
But what was your introduction to the movie musical? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it was very uh like random and not calculated at all. My family was not a movie going family. I think I remember the first movie we went to go see, I probably went with my uncle, um, and it was The Lion King. But I think even before that, which is still very informative, like my if my mom was going to take us to the film, like to the theater, it was to see a Disney movie. But even before that, I remember we would go to the public library a lot. And she basically, like, I mean, there were three of us. We were all very close in age. She was exhausted. She was a young mother. And so we would just like kind of run around and do whatever. And I remember exploring the area where there was what, VHSs, DVDs, like, and it must have been VHSs if I was that
Yeah,
young.
I know you're young. You're not that young, bitch.
But I guess I don't remember the tape itself, but whatever. I remember I picked something out and it was Singing in the Rain. And I remember watching it alone. I don't know how. I took it home, I watched it, and I was just like, what is this? I certainly did not understand it. I didn't understand what the story was. I didn't understand, all the Hollywood stuff. But I was so captivated by the beauty of it. It was just so colorful. Even as a child, I understood like the immense romance of like him just like walking in the rain and like the
Yeah,
beautiful like the movement. It was just it. I've talked before on this podcast about when I first saw a Miyazaki film. It's like something just happens to you where it's like,
yes,
what is this? I've never seen something like this, and that's what happened with Singing in the Rain. I was like unfazed by, I wasn't like, this is weird that they're singing and dancing. I was just
right.
like, it's just like the talent level is astounding. Like as a child who hasn't seen any of this, and like we did not have a theater, like robust theater program when I was in middle school or high school. I had never, I still have not seen a lot of classics. Like, we didn't do Guys and Dolls and, all that stuff. Like Oklahoma, I don't think I saw Oklahoma until like I moved to New York. I know the songs.
That's such a common story. I don't
But
think I
like,
saw Oklahoma till I moved to New York.
I just think like, there are a lot of spaces in this country where musical theater does not, have a foothold. I think one of my main things is like musical theater is a privilege because it's
Yeah.
expensive and
It
it's,
truly is. And like listen, and I don't want to be like, oh, I went to like a rich like we did not. The reason we had a theater department was our teacher, and I'm gonna give her a huge shout out here because I truly have really fond memories of her. And honestly, if you have a good teacher, it is one of the best things in the world. Mrs. Tolan was the best, like hands down. I'm sure there's some people who have different memories of her, but I think nothing but the best of her. And she had a very rich papa. And Papa paid for those sets. He
yes.
paid for those costumes. Like these were not school funded.
Yeah.
And so like our theater program looked good. We had
Hmm.
things, I still remember my friend Bo telling me she had never been to a high school production where there was a standing ovation in the middle for fucking Oklahoma.
Wow, incredible.
And so
Well,
like yeah, we had a really good theater department, and it's like 95% Mrs. Tolan.
yeah.
So
Props to Miss Stolen, and all teachers out on all the theater arts teachers out there. Which is why I think like I especially love musical movies. Like
yeah,
some people are never gonna see a Broadway level show in their life, even for a national tour, whatever. Like that's just there's a barrier there that they're never gonna be able to come over.
right.
And for a long time I was that kid. And so being able to see, Oklahoma, The King and I, all these like kind of really intrinsic to the American story and culture. Like to be able to see that on screen, like it's a unique and lovely privilege And also a challenge. I think a lot of taking these great stage shows and adapting them for the film is a challenge. And
Yes.
some are definitely more successful than others. Dear Evan Hansen.
And I truly think we're going to get into that during both the rewind and the fast forward. But there are musical theater and film are very different beasts, and it doesn't you really have to have a concept going in. And the only other thing I wanted to say, and I know you're trying to get to the rewind, is just, you're right. Musical theater is very much a privilege, but it is sad that especially in the United States, there's not a lot of focus on the arts in general. And that's not even just, I'm not even saying just theater, like music, the
fine art.
Yeah, fine art, like that stuff is unfortunately cast on the wayside because people don't think it has value. And that's incredibly incorrect. That musical theater can teach just as much teamwork or relying on people around you as sports can. Fine art teaches you to think critically. Being able to play music, being able to learn music, to read music is as important as learning other languages. And so it's just one of those things that, like, you saying that just like made my heart so heavy for a moment, because we do unfortunately, like, listen, I'm not having kids, like I'm not putting kids through that, but like I don't know where I would be without that theater program. So
100%. And hopefully, with the success of Wicked, maybe will be a resurgence and people will, get back into.
I think we're just going to see a lot more kids wanting to be pop girlies, but whatever. Fine.
Okay. Let's get into our rewind. So this is going to be loosey-goosey, crazy-wazy. But I wanted to start off with...
It's going to be Patrick Swayze.
It's going to be Patrick... Honey, if I could be Patrick Swayze, oh my God. Musical film was a natural progression or development after the emergence of sound and film. I think we're not going to spend too much time here just because it takes a little while for it to like really click into what we think of as like the modern movie musical. But it's important to know that like a lot of this beginning era was pushing film and technology to, get butts in seats.
Yeah.
Back in the 20s and 30s, it was like, these are huge shows. People are getting out of the house, spending top dollar to be entertained and wowed and dazzled with like spectacle. That's not that different today. But back then it wasn't like CGI, 3D, 4X, whatever.
But they're also, and we'll come to find that out as we go along, some of these musicals not immune to that shit either, though.
Yeah, right. Like they're trying to figure out like ways to get people in seats. And so like seeing, a chorus line of girlies, kicking up and down on screen was like just so crazy. And especially if it's like choreographed and synchronized to music, whereas before it was, people were watching silent films with a live orchestra playing music there for them. And
here's just a good moment to mention, some of these film adaptations started in the silent era. And I know that sounds antithetical to how you think about how musicals work, but there were very popular operas, operettas, and musical theater pieces that were adapted to film. And like you said, they would have a live score, but that was about it. There was no singer that would come out and sing those songs or anything. It would just be like a normal silent film with a live score.
So the first, and this is not the first adaptation, but it's worth mentioning. In 1927, The Jazz Singer is the first, movie to have an audio track. Hella racist, because of course it is. Like the star is in full blackface.
Welcome to America, everybody.
Yeah. The Marx Brothers also make a film called Animal Crackers, which isn't a musical, but they have music in it. Like there are musical. They wanted to have a musical number in all of their films to showcase their talent. For them, it wasn't like so much, and a lot of these stars, it was like, look what else I can do to like entertain, and they weren't so constrained of like, this is a musical, this is a straight film or whatever.
Actually, and like I'm not poo-pooing you. You're correct. Before they did Animal Crackers, they did The Coconuts, and The Coconuts came out a year before, and that does actually have a lot of musical elements in it, but it is mostly a vehicle for the Marx Brothers. Some very, very funny dialogue.
What I meant was, you're going to be here all winter, and I'm stuck with the hotel anyhow. Why don't you grab me until you can make other arrangements?
My dear Mr. Hammer, I shall never get married before my daughter.
You did once.
I think, and like, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the first, well, I guess Animal Crackers was an adaptation of
Yes.
a stage show. So like, that's kind of the first adaptation. The Gay Divorcee, I think, is a more like pure adaptation. The Gay Divorcee was like
Soon to be me.
Gavin's married, y'all. The sequel is like the bisexual divorcee.
Yeah, exactly.
The Gay Divorcee's music is a show by Cole Porter, and it was called just The Gay Divorce.
Yes.
But when they adapted it for film, they called it The Gay Divorcee, which I guess, I don't know, was more fun to say. It has a little more spice on it. Also,
It's certainly gayer.
Yeah, it is certainly gayer. One of the earlier movie adaptations as well is Anything Goes, which is like, I think the key here, right off the bat, what I wanted to tell everyone is like, shows that are adapted into films need to be mostly very fucking popular. Just
Right.
like they need to transcend. And the reason why Wicked is so popular is because the songs are, no pun intended, popular. Like they are pop songs, things
Yeah.
that like kind of get into the zeitgeist. And they like producers are like, oh, this has found a huge, enormous audience on Broadway, and we think we can make even more money, showcasing talent and showcasing like the visual identity and all this like kind of extravagance on screen. And that kind of like from the beginning is the reason why people are deciding like, oh, we made a butt ton of money here, like, and these run forever. Why don't we bring that to the masses? So, I don't have a lot to say in the 30s, 40s era, like, and the golden era of movie musicals is like the 30s to 50s. I would say, and this is my opinion, things don't really pop off until Oklahoma.
Yeah.
For me, like, I think what we imagine in our popular imagination of like the American movie musical, things aren't really happening until Oklahoma. And honestly, like, it's not just Oklahoma. It's like Rodgers and Hammerstein. Like,
Yeah. Well, that's what I was just going to say. I think the impact that Rodgers and Hammerstein have on musical theater is the generating of the way musical theater is thought of nowadays. There are plenty of works. Like the very last thing I just watched was The Boys from Syracuse, which is a Rodgers and Hart musical. And
Right.
funny enough, I've been thinking a lot about this because I think more Rodgers and Hart's work ended up more in the popular zeitgeist outside of their shows. Like the song Falling in Love with Love is from Boys from Syracuse.
Falling in love with love is falling for safety.
Falling in love is playing the fool.
My Funny Valentine.
Yep.
These songs like make their way into the American songbook, but aren't necessarily thought of as specifically like, oh, this is from this musical. But Rodgers
Right.
and Hammerstein craft shows that make their musical numbers so integral to what's happening. They come up with the idea sort of that when a character no longer can express what they're feeling, they sing about it.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting thing to watch that adapted to film, because film's all about pacing. Film, like, even if you're not conscious of it, film is all about the way it's cut, the way like it looks, the way one scene moves from the next and informs the next, and like intuitively makes you think about what is going to happen in the next scene. And musical numbers inherently on film don't do that. They stop action, depending on how they're choreographed or depending on that. And so I think that's also like a really crazy challenge. I think you're absolutely right by pointing out Oklahoma as being like a really good first successful run at that, because they found a way to make those numbers both stagey and interesting and push the narrative forward without feeling like the movie's just fully stopped to watch somebody. I always think about, and this is not an adaptation, but Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And it's not a bad song, but Cheer Up Charlie crashes that movie to a halt. and that's what you don't want when you're adapting a musical. Because I even saw some of these that I really liked that, like, I was like, towards the second act, I was like, oh boy, like we could have cut one of these numbers. So
I think like that's one of the key things we'll see here. It's like, it's very Broadway shows run up to like 3 hours. And a lot of movies just will not do that. And so what do we cut? What do we not cut? Are we going to take the gamble and make it very long?
Right.
Are we,
hey, is there a really great number in the second act that we think people might not stay for? Put it up front. Because I just watched Kiss Me Kate for the first time, which is a musical I love, and I've seen many different stage versions of it. I'd never seen the movie, and I was shocked that it begins with So in Love and Too Darn Hot. 2 songs that don't even really come in until like midway through the show. I was like, whoa, what a weird place to put them. But I get it. It's because you want to grab your audience.
Yeah. So Oklahoma comes out in 1955. It's obviously one of the most famous shows ever done. Rodgers and Hammerstein, like Evan was mentioning, they really pioneered this idea of songs not only developing characters, but moving plot along. We're learning about the story while we were singing and dancing. It's not just like, a Park and Bark, showcase for talent, which it is, but there's more to that. I think Oklahoma is one of my favorite shows of all time. I think it's so well crafted. I think the song, every one of them, this is like a barn burner. I think this movie is beautiful. I sat and watched Oklahoma and I said, wicked fucking wishes.
Wishes, correct.
It looked this beautiful. Like, I imagine a lot of their background shots are just like backdrops, but even those are stunning. And even when they're not backdrops, when they're like, I'm like, oh yeah, they're in fucking like fields with the sky around them. Like it's just beautiful. When they're standing around, like I know that American like fields and whatever barns don't look this way, but it is beautiful. The colors of everything. It's just truly a stunning movie. The original show opened on Broadway in 1943. The movie did not come out until 1955. But it just kind of kicks off like this wild whirlwind of Rodgers and Hammerstein bangers that come out. Carousel the next year, South Pacific in 1958. After South Pacific, The King and I, Pajama Game, Sound of Music. Like it just was, banger, 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 banger.
And just to talk about, like, this is me being the annoying technical guy, like the other thing that adapting a musical into film is it allows you, and listen, I know this all sounds very simple and I'm trying to break it down in like a simple way. One of the things I love about the mixed reviews is that I constantly tell people, like, you don't have to listen to any of the episodes in order if you don't want to. And one of the things that I like that we do is we kind of provide a one-on-one perspective for a lot of things. So like you don't have to know anything about film when you come into our show, but hopefully you come out of it learning something. And so because they're adapting a musical from stage to screen is that you can play with the way it looks. You can do things that a musical could never get away with. No matter how technical your musical is, you still only have a certain number of locations. And so when this movie comes around, like famously in Oklahoma, Oh, What a Beautiful Morning starts off stage. Mm-hmm. And in the movie, it's Curly on screen right away in a massive cornfield. Kansas City takes place in a giant train station because
he's
you can
on the train.
Yeah, exactly. You can have these locations that you only have to use once. I think, with the transition from stage to screen, you have to give a reason for, even though, like you were saying, musicals not necessarily accessible for the average Joe because there is a price barrier, though they were much cheaper back then. You have to give a reason to make people go to the theater instead of seeing it on stage. And then conversely to that, you also have to create something that still makes people want to see the stage version. Yeah. And not just see the film version. I think that, that's one of the harder things we're also seeing about Wicked right now, too. Wicked has been on Broadway for 20 years or so. And I think the goal of the movie shouldn't just be, oh, this is the version the Vox Populi can see. Like, they should still want to go see the stage version.
Yeah, you should want to come to New York and go see. Yeah, I love Oklahoma.
I don't say I'm no better than anybody else, but I'll be taking time just as good. Territory folks should stick together, territory folks should all be pals. Cowboys dance for the farmers, farmers dance for the ranchers' scouts.
I'm just gonna like run through the Rodgers and Hammerstein stuff that I watched, and we'll get to other 50 stuff because there's a ton more 50 stuff. But The King and I, beautiful gowns. We've talked about that movie a couple of times on the show. Sound of Music, gag, like, again, beautiful. Just Julie Andrews. I think the recipe for like great movie musical adaptations is like point of view, a star who can fucking bang, and just like building like an expansive, all-encompassing world like that you could only dream of in like you can dream it on the stage, you can see it and be in it on film. Chicago, I think, is like a good example of this as well. Like if the way that I went to go see Chicago on Broadway thinking I was getting the movie, oh my God, ladies and like everyone listening to this, I promise you the best version of Chicago is the film version.
I'm gonna put slide a big tack into Chicago for the moment that we will pull out later because I think there's some interesting things I have to say about that, or hopefully interesting. Hopefully you find them interesting. But no, I agree. Like the Sound of Music is maybe Rodgers and Hammerstein's magnum opus, and it's so funny because in terms of scope, like in terms of things like Oklahoma or even like Carousel, which is I fucking hate.
Yeah, Carousel's a rough one.
It's super rough. And I saw somebody like kind of defending it the other day. I was like, no, baby. I've also been in Carousel. I was one of the hornpipe dancers. I can do the original Jerome Robbins choreography for that.
Wow.
That's right. I also used to dance. So you're going to hear some real bitchy opinions about dancing later on too. I think what's funny about The Sound of Music is it is so insular. It's like this one family, and like the most in the big production numbers are still the family themselves, really. And so it's funny because to me it's the one, like if you have to like Mount Rushmore, or not even Mount Rushmore, like Statue of Liberty, Rodgers and Hammerstein's film adaptations, it would be Sound of Music.
I mean, like, and a very good example of this, like world building and like really being cinematic, is Julie Andrews at the beginning, like swooping in over the Swiss Alps or whatever.
Yeah.
And like she's just twirling around. Those hills are alive with The Sound of Music, okay?
The hills are alive with the sound of music, with songs they have sung for 1,000 years.
And there's a reason why it has stood the test of time. I watched it and I was just like, my God, there's no, like, every one of those songs is a banger. People know them. Even if you haven't seen the show, you're like, what? It's just so good. And she's amazing. Christopher Plummer's amazing. So good.
Can you just imagine Robert Wise off camera just being like, twirl more. Julie, twirl.
I thought about like, how does she know how many twirls to do before like stopping to like catch the camera and like start singing? I don't know how they did it. Movie magic. Other, I would say, significant or notable things from the 50s. Annie Get Your Gun, which is a very popular show. So many mega stars wanted to be in musicals.
Yes.
Like Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, like Kim Novak, like these people who were like Marlon Brando, like they wanted to.
I think part of it is they wanted to be able to prove that they could do it as well, too. I think there's not a lot of actors there's so many actors nowadays who their like greatest fear is singing. And I get that, know thyself. I get it. But like people wanted to prove they could do these. And also like you're going to see a lot of rampant movie musicals in which people can't sing, and like it's the music. What's that?
Mame.
Yeah, exactly. Like you see these musicals get tailored to them, hopefully in some way, shape, or form, or don't.
Yeah, and I just say that because also I think these actors and actresses were trying to like get out of typecasting. Like there were guys out there who were just playing, gruff or whatever. I mean, like I can sing and dance. I can do a lot of things. And these musicals really showcase the wide dearth of talent that these people had. I would say broadly, the 50s era of movie musicals are very kind of like rom-commy, very kind of like, the girls and gals and like, the trials and tribulations of love and stuff like that. We get Guys and Dolls, Pal Joey, like I mentioned before, Funny Face, which is not an adaptation,
Right.
so we're not going to be talking about that. There are a couple other things that are not, kind of, there are bigger, serious stuff. Porgy and Bess, which we did talk
Yes.
about in our Sidney Poitier episode.
Which is still impossible to find, and like it's wild once again that there is an Otto Preminger film, one of our directors we've decided is one of our greatest directors that just can never be seen because the Gershwin estate won't allow it. So like
There's a very bad rip on YouTube.
yeah, we've both seen it. It's not great.
It's hard to watch.
Yeah. I do want to give one more shout out to a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical that I watched for the first time that I had never seen before because I went in very trepidatious, and that is a film called Flower Drum Song.
Trepidatious is a good word for that one.
Yeah, and I ended up really liking it. I don't have no idea how you feel about it, but that's because I was sort of, it's as Chinese as a musical written by two white men can be, and so there is that aspect of it. But I do actually really appreciate that for this film made in the 50s, that it has a majority Asian cast, which we would not see again from a Hollywood film until the 90s with the
Joy Luck Club.
Yes, the Joy Luck Club. Isn't that wild? That took 40 fucking years to make another majority Asian cast in movie. And then also, I like that it played, because it had an Asian cast mostly, it played against the viewers' expectations. Like there's a musical number that takes place in a Chinese club that I watched and was like thinking like, oh, this is a racist musical number, but like being performed by these Chinese people for a white audience, like they go out of their way in the film to show you it is a white audience. And I just kept thinking to myself like, oh, but they know where their bread is, but they're like, we will perpetrate these, we will continue these stupid stereotypes because you stupid white people will just fucking buy into them, and we will gladly take your money while doing it and play inside your system. There's another great moment where one of the characters is robbed by one of the only white people with a speaking line in the movie, where he like a guy runs up and like steals his wallet, and then he gets home and his wife's like, what happened? He's like, a white man stole my money. And she's like, what did he look like? And he's like, I don't know, they all look alike. And like I just appreciated this idea that they were like playing with the reverse of expectations. And so like not a perfect movie, but really good. Also shout out to the youngest brother in the movie, who's like totally fucking queer coded, and at one point he like dances with one of the main girls and his dad yells at him, and he just goes, for you non-Patreon people, he makes the square with his fingers and just goes, absolutely, and walks away. Like, and I was just like, fuck yes, queen. Like,
Yeah, pop off girly.
Strictly.
So when we get to the 60s, things get a little bit more, it's either like hard dramas or like Americana, everything is great still.
I think that's the huge inflection point. Like the musicals are trying to push the envelope to become either considered more serious theater, or going in the reverse and trying to become much more crowd pleasers because that's the money they're going to make.
Right, they're trying to recapture the wholesomeness of the 50s, all that stuff. We start off with perhaps one of the most ambitious shows of all time, West Side Story, in 1961. We've talked about this in our Rita Moreno episode, of course. Love this movie. I think this movie is a masterpiece. We've talked about how it was a crazy film because they fired the first director because he was insane. Is that Jerome Robbins?
Yeah, he was the choreographer, and
Yeah.
he was wasting so much film. Like, it just, you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't have a million takes. And Rita said like it was just nonstop over and over again, take after take, and it was kind of brutal filming. This won a million Oscars. I guess that's another thing I haven't mentioned. Like a lot of maybe not a lot, but I think these big productions, these big spectacle things, are kind of like awards baity type things more often than not, trying to like showcase talent of people who are not just great actors but great singers. So like Rita Moreno, they were like, amazing gal, here's your Oscar. Jennifer Hudson, Anne Hathaway, like there's a tradition of this, and of the Academy awarding productions that like, wow, it takes a lot of work to mount a musical film like this. So also like on the technical side. So there's that. We get like other notable things from the 60s. Gypsy, or the first version of Gypsy in 1962, The Music Man in 1962. I had never seen The Music Man and finally saw it, and I was like, huh, okay.
What's funny is I have been, and this is very snobby of me because I've held this opinion since I was in The Music Man.
Sure.
The stage show is, the movie is so much better than the stage show. And part of it is the filmic trick of it, is that like, that's the stage show is so presentational, is so like, there's not a lot of big, choral numbers. There's the, the opening, the like, there's nothing halfway about the Iowa way to treat you when we treat you, which we may not do at all. Like that, that's a big production number. And then like Mary and the Librarian has like some dancing in it, but the way the movie is shot, the way that they like really expand those things out to make them big. And then the ending with all of the kids and all it's so much better and so much more satisfying. And I think it's one of the first like stage adaptations that's like, it expands upon the musical and just makes it even better.
But when I try in here to tell you, dear, I love you madly, madly, Madam Librarian, Marian, it's a long-lost cause I can never win. For the civilized world accepts as unforgivable sin any talking out loud with any librarian, such as Ladies' Dance Committee meets Tuesday nights. Ian.
Yeah, The Music Man, I thought, and this is also worth mentioning in this time period, like the dancing is so important. Like,
yes.
I would argue like the 50s and 60s specifically, they really give time and space just for like these beautiful lyrical kind of like hoofing numbers, where it's like for no reason beyond like, there is some storytelling, I guess, but like it's mostly just like showing off and like
right. Well, it's the visual of it. It's we have the ability to show you it. Like we can I say real quick, and I don't want to really talk about the modern musical too much, but like I need the modern musical to go back to dance numbers that are not just stomping.
Yeah.
And it's not just Wicked's fault. Though Wicked, literally, there are scenes where the only dance move is they extend their foot out and they go bum, bum, bum on the floor like they're fucking horses. Yep. I was like, what are we doing? We're just stomping along to the beat. Matilda is the same way. And I really it's one of those things where it's just like, no, choreography. And it's different than I love tap. I love, not to bring it back to Kiss Me Kate, but I was watching Kiss Me Kate earlier again. And there's this really beautiful tap number in the middle of Too Darn Hot. And what's cool is it being film, it instructs you where it wants you to look. So it's taking the lead and showing you her whole body at first as she's dancing. So it's showing you Ann Miller doing this amazing tap number. And at first it's showing you her whole body. And then it cuts to a medium shot. So it's just her torso up to her head and her in a fan. And you can still hear her tapping, and she's making those moves because she just showed you she can make those moves. But the camera is instructing you like, no, look at her. Look at how fucking beautiful she is. Look at this fan. Also, the movie was shot in 3D, so it was supposed to kind of be like the fan's going out into the audience. Like, but it's this really impressive, like, oh, the camera's really instructing you as an audience member. The editor is instructing you as an audience member, the director, where you need to be focused. And you don't have to be seeing the full thing. Whereas, like, if you're seeing it, on a proscenium stage,
you're seeing all of it. Yeah.
You're seeing all of it. Exactly.
Because they brought up The Music Man. I think the Marion the Librarian number in The Music Man film, incredible.
Yes.
Incredible. The cast of Music Man, incredible. We talked about the next film that I thought was kind of notable was My Fair Lady in our Audrey Hepburn episode. I think this is a good example of perhaps casting that is not great. She famously couldn't sing, so they hired a voice girly to sing behind her, which is I'm not necessarily against. In West Side Story, that same thing happened. Who is the girly in West Side Story? I
believe it's the same, isn't it?
It's
Marnie Nixon.
Yeah, so Natalie Wood couldn't sing, and so Marnie Nixon was the voice of Maria. And
here's something
My Fair Lady.
And The King and I, and she doubled for Deborah Carr. And so this is something I've been thinking about since our Deborah Carr episode, which was February, so almost a full year. I've come to this conclusion. It's probably not going to be popular. I don't think we have to cast singers anymore.
Wow.
I think if you can cast somebody who can sing it, great, fine, works. But Deborah Carr had this quote in that episode where she said, if I was doing The King and I on Broadway, it wouldn't have to be perfect. But because it's a recorded film, it has to be perfect because it is there forever. And so she wasn't comfortable doing the songs herself. And also she was really gracious about Marnie Nixon during the press and being like, no, it wasn't me, it was her and whatnot.
Because Natalie Wood for a long time was like, that was me, diva.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, even Audrey Hepburn didn't really say that, but she was like, oh, I did record some of the songs. And then, people have put out her versions of some of the songs over time. And it's like, okay, but the version we got was good. That's not. And so I agree. I think if it exists on film and it's going to exist forever, it has to be amazing, which is once again, the reverse of that, cast Jennifer Hudson. Jennifer Hudson's amazing in Dreamgirls. It's not just about the singing, but I think sometimes the casting for the performance is better than, the reverse of that is Madonna and Evita.
Yeah. I think you hit something very astute though, because Deborah Carr is amazing in The King and I. The skill that she has to be able to emote and match up exactly with the lip sync, that is a heavy skill. And I think I much prefer real excellent actresses like that who can do that compared to good actresses who are, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, fucking Meryl Streep, who is, really reaching out here. She is no Beth Level. Why is she doing Beth Level songs in The Prom? Why? Why is she croaking her way through Mamma Mia? It's just, I get it. But and she can sing, but she cannot sing the caliber of songs where it's really just fucking belt your face off. It's just not.
Well, I know we probably both have kind of opinions about the film version of Sweeney Todd, but that's an entire cast of people who can't sing the songs.
Correct.
Fucking dub them then. If you believe that those are the best actors to play the roles, then find people that can sing those songs for them. Because that movie, in terms of the singing portion, is embarrassing.
Yeah, Tim Burton said, I have some friends.
Yeah.
But okay. So Funny Girl, we get other kind of really big movie musicals like Oliver, Hello Dolly, Sweet Charity. We talked a little bit about Hello Dolly in our Barbara Streisand episode.
And Hello Dolly comes along at a time in which the movie musical is starting to wane. It was seen like a big gamble to put that much money into a movie musical.
And famously, it flopped. So it was, we're kind of we're not at the end, but we are kind of marching towards the end.
Because you treated me so rotten and rough, I have had enough of feeling low. So wave your little hand and whisper, so long, dearie, dearie, should have said so long ago.
The 70s era is a little bit more rejecting kind of that Americana sweetness that we were used to in the 50s and 60s. The 70s is really about the rock and roll hippie year or era, which was obviously reflecting the culture we were in. Obviously, you know, Vietnam War, grappling with, you know, what is America, grappling with
Right.
who are we, grappling with all that stuff. The first adaptation we get of this era is Fiddler on the Roof, actually, which I think is excellent. I love me some Fiddler. It is a
Me too.
It is a long movie, but again, great point of view, building a world around us, and the songs are just so banging. Like, it's so good. I don't have a lot more to say that.
Well, no, but it's also interesting, and I think this is, you know, on a film level, like you're going to start seeing directors. I mean, you already did, like Robert Wise did West Side Story. You know, he was the second director that was brought in, and then did, you know, Sound of Music. Norman Jewison, who does Fiddler on the Roof as well as Jesus Christ Superstar. You're seeing a lot of directors who like do more than one musical. You're going to see from this era as well. Richard Attenborough directs his first adaptation, which was this very weird musical I watched called Oh, What a Lovely War, which I didn't think really worked. And it's mostly like old dance hall numbers and whatnot, but it's about how war is bad. And it's like very original thought there, Richard.
Did you know that war is bad?
Yeah. Hey guys, war is bad. Specifically World War I, but also everything else that's happened since. And Richard Attenborough then goes on to direct A Chorus Line, you know, so you see these directors who do multiple. And then obviously I think the biggest name to come out of musical theater is Bob Fosse, who starts off as an actor, dancer, becomes a choreographer, moves into becoming a filmmaker, directs Cabaret, you know, one of the most lauded.
The year right after Fiddler on the Roof, Cabaret comes out, which seminal, like, you know, Liza, Fosse, like, and I think also this was kind of like the era of like these people were rock stars. Like Bob Fosse was like, sorry mom, but like he was fucking, and he was, you know, doing drugs, and like this was rock and roll era of theater. You mentioned Jesus Christ Superstar. I watched that for the first time.
I've still never seen it. I've still never seen the original.
I was asking a buddy of mine who is into theater stuff, and Jesus Christ Superstar is interesting because sometimes films or directors will make decisions where it's like, we're not just going to do a very faithful adaptation. We're not just going to like take the show, put it on screen, call it a day.
Right. Which is once again the advantage of film.
Right. This one, I could be wrong. Someone, if it wants to discourse with me about this later, you can. I'm pretty sure the whole vibe is that there's a group of hippies who take their bus out into the desert and basically put on this production for themselves. Like they're cosplaying, living. I don't know if they're maybe doing drugs and high. I think it's kind of like the vibe as well. Also, this is the era of like musicals where it's like the rock and roll musical where everyone's just kind of like actually singing like, what?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, what's going on? Like it's very that all the time.
Listen, Jesus, to the warning I give. Please remember that I want us to live. So come on, he won't listen to me.
It's funny too, because on the reverse side of that, you know, you have the musical movie adaptation of Hair, which actually, you know, like you said, 70s, it comes on a decade too late, essentially. Like Hair came out, it's a musical about war, you know, protesting the Vietnam War. And the movie version just comes out after. And so instead of being this like,
the movie comes out in 1979, just for the context.
Yeah. And instead of being this like contemporary, like anti-war thing, it becomes this almost like retro pastiche of like all the hippies in it are just kind of like living in the park, like being kind of kooky and whatnot. And it's funny. I liked it better than I'm describing, but I was still, and it's Milos. And I think it's honestly because Milos Forman is such an amazing filmmaker. I liked that aspect, but I was like, baby, this is dumb. Like this seems dumb.
It felt dated already, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and it didn't lean into, it didn't build the worlds well enough, frankly.
I got my hair, I got my head, I got my brains, I got my ears, I got my eyes, I got my nose, I got my mouth, I got my teeth.
in this era, Godspell, Maimed. We talked about Maimed, I think, during our holiday Christmas movies.
Yes, because We Need a Little Christmas is from it.
Yeah. And famously, that is the movie where Lucille Ball plays the title character. It was her like dream project, and she cannot sing.
No.
That's why I feel like sometimes I'm like, man, we're so lucky to see someone like Annalie Ashford, who is like a physical comedy force like Lucille Ball, but also has pipes on her that will not quit. So I think also important for all of us, like when you see someone who's so talented and good like that, like soak it up. It is hard work. And movies, like, not that making a movie is easy, but like they sing it once, they record it, whatever.
Right.
Oftentimes they are singing to a track anyway that they've recorded. Like Annalie Ashford is doing 8 shows a week. Like that's different.
Here's another thing that we got to stop doing with the movie musical. We got to stop
singing live.
Yeah. You got to stop bragging about it. Okay. If you want to do it, fine. Great. But there were plenty of movie musicals that used to sing live as well. And so it's not like this, like I remember when Les Miserables came out and they were like, oh, we did everything live, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, that's nothing new. Like, that's just an older style of the way we used to do things. And B, like, if you're going to process the voice that much on the end, because that's what I kept thinking about in Wicked. I was like, I'm sure they sounded great live, but what I'm hearing is not that live performance because it's been so processed at this point that like, what's the point,
Literally, what's the point? And that's crazy because when you compare that to something like Dreamgirls, where she did not sing live.
No,
Jennifer Hudson did not sing live. I think the only Anika Noni Rose asked to sing live, and she didn't make a big deal out of it. She doesn't have like all the banging songs. She has a couple like little numbers.
By the way, love Anika Noni Rose, and
love her.
All the best for her. But anyways,
but Jennifer Hudson was in that fucking studio, like getting it perfect, and then transposing that emotion on stage more impressive than Anne Hathaway or Ariana Grande singing live, and then getting it like and listen, I love both those girlies, and I know they both can sing and are talented, but like relax. You're right, guys. You're right.
I thought the same thing listening to Cynthia Erivo. Like I think Cynthia's voice is amazing. And I mean, and we've even talked about it in non-musical films. There was what's that, like Wild Nights at Reno or whatever, that movie she did. Yeah. And she sings an a cappella version of a song in that movie, and it's so fucking good. Like she has the pipes, but also like it neither takes nor adds to the experience for me knowing that she was doing that live,
Well, also like, tell the truth. So you're telling me, Diva, that you were strapped into the fucking
the flying harness
and then the green screen, and you're like belting "It's me," like like come on.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and that's why it's become one of those marketing ploys. It's sort of the same way, and if you've not checked out our Patreon, I said this about The Room Next Door. It's sort of how I feel about like the words first English language movie by Pedro Almodovar. Like, okay, like who's asking for that? Like that's just a marketing point. Like that's
the end of the 70s, we get Rocky Horror Picture Show, which Gavin mentioned way up top. Kooky, weird,
right.
Amazing.
and you can do so much more things with that, on screen than you could ever do on stage.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I've recently seen, and maybe I just need to get off the internet, but I've recently seen some backlash to Rocky Horror about how, like, I mean, obviously wording is not great. Regardless, I've seen some backlash against Rocky Horror recently, not just because of the language, but also because it presents like a very gay male perspective of queerness. And I'm just like, children, like, you need to stop.
Touch grass.
Like, yeah,
touch grass.
Please. Yeah. Touch some grass. Yeah.
I mean, it's a great show. Kooky, fun, not that serious. There is a really great Fagtasia. It's a drag show that happens here in Brooklyn. They do musical adaptations for like clubs essentially, and they do a Rocky Horror that is a cast full of all sorts of creatures of the night. I do recommend.
I'm just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania.
Really quickly, a little night music in 1977, Grease in 1978, which is a enormous hit.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it is throwing back to the 50s. That whole kind of like sweet, Americana thing. And so everything's cyclical.
And, well, here's another interesting thing about that specifically. So the original Grease starts out in Chicago, very dirty, like super, super dirty. Edges sanded down for Broadway, obviously, like, but still allowed to be because, there's not as many people that get to see a Broadway show as there are, and then the Hollywood picture comes around and just really sands down those edges. And obviously, like, things still make it in, like, It's a Sweet Pussy Wagon, a real pussy wagon in the song Grease Lightning. Like, those things stick around, but like it's kind of a shadow of itself. And now the version of Grease when it's on Broadway is more the movie. Like and so like you're also seeing how they kind of switch back and forth. It's interesting that you would bring up at the beginning of the episode the Chicago thing, and I'm still leaving that pin in there, but we're going to come back to it. One of the things that you haven't seen with the stage show of Chicago is the incorporation of the movie stuff, because you think it would, but because it has not closed since the movie came out. But I guarantee if Chicago ever closes and there's like a 5-year gap, a 10-year gap, and then it comes back to Broadway,
it's going to be a movie version.
Yeah, it's going to look a lot more like the movie than.
So after, Hair comes out in 1979, and now we're in the 80s. The 80s and 90s are kind of like a dark era, ages of movie musicals. Number one, because LOL, allegedly the disco died, right? And then the 90s, and that was like, early 80s. And then the 90s was slacker, ironic, irony, everything. There was no space for sweet saccharine, no space for being earnest. Earnestness was not it. So we have very few movie musical adaptations. We get Annie in 1982. We get The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas in 82 as well.
Baller.
Bangin'.
Oh my God.
We get A Chorus Line in 1985, which I'd never seen, and I am a changed person. I want to say one thing, and that is the line, the young Asian woman who is in the movie, she says, one day I want to have a normal life. I want to, and fucking Michael Douglas, who is the director or the choreographer, he's like, oh, what, like get married and have a bunch of kids? And she says, I just want to like not be on a diet anymore.
Yeah.
I was so like gutted. Oh, if you don't know, Chorus Line is just about a group of dancers who are auditioning in a very intense audition to make it into the chorus of a Broadway musical. And the choreographer, director person is kind of an asshole and wants like them to be real and wants them to, show who they are, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, can I just fucking dance for you? And like, what do you want? What do you want from me? What do you want to know about me? And one by one, they kind of like tell their stories about like, they've been struggling for so long and they really need this job. I just like A Chorus Line as a concept, as a show. And again, like it's so dance heavy. It is beautiful. Like when they're in that gold and the hats, it's just
Well, that's I always think of like one of my first editing lessons, like, and I was a child, so please don't think I'm this stupid, but like the one of the first numbers in it is I Can Do That, which is the boy talking about like going to dance class and like outdoing his sister. And like, as a boy who danced, I took tap and jazz for 15 years. So that's my credentials. And like, I always connected with that number, and I always hated that they cut away from it, because in my stupid little boy brain, I was like, he's still dancing. Like he's still out there doing a production number. Like, what is he doing? And my dad was like, no, he's not. Like, they're not making that man still dance for no cameras. Like, that's not how movies work. Yeah. And so like, that was one of my first like, oh yeah, duh. Like you cut away from,
So back in the 80s, Little Shop of Horrors comes out in 1986. All these movies from Annie to Little Shop of Horrors, there's 4 of them, LOL. They don't do terribly well, like money-wise, critically. There's one movie in the 90s, and that is Evita. Is respected by some, loathed by others. But like there just is no appetite for musical movies at this time. Like, obviously musicals are happening on Broadway and elsewhere, but not on the silver screen. This next era, I'm calling the millennial era. It's, like 12, 13-ish years. It's the millennial era / Chicago era. The impetus for this era is number one, Moulin Rouge comes out in 2001. And it's not only successful at the box office, it is critically lauded. And then in 2002, Chicago, which is actually an adaptation, similarly is this gangbusters. Like, out of nowhere, this musical that had been trying to be made forever with 1 million people auditioning and directors coming and going and Harvey Weinstein being an asshole about all those things. It comes out and it fucking wins a boat ton of Oscars, just like is growing money left and right. And that kicks off this millennium era of movie musical adaptations. Before I get into like after Chicago, I do want to say though, in 2001, also Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which is so good. I saw a version of it on stage with Darren Criss in San Francisco. Incredible. This movie,
I saw 3 different Hedwigs when it was on Broadway.
well, and that was kind of like the gag though, right? Like different people were coming for that through that role. John Cameron Mitchell, who directed it, wrote it, starred in it. It's just like a powerhouse, top to bottom experience. And
it was my 5-star review when we did our Drag on Film episode. Yeah,
and with good cause. It's phenomenal. And unfortunately, it does kind of get like lost in the shuffle,
right,
of this era because it wasn't like super pop. I would argue it became more popular after the movie.
The last time I saw you, we just split in two. You was looking at me, I was looking at you. You had a way so familiar, I could not recognize, 'cause you had blood on your face. I had blood in my eyes, but I could swear by your expression that the pain down in your soul was the same as the one down in mine. That's the pain that cuts a straight line down through the heart. We call it love.
Which is really unfortunate because it is actually a very good, like the movie is a really good adaptation. Hedwig is clearly a labor of love for a lot of people not putting a lot of money into it. And I think it still holds up. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Herculean task to get any movie musical adaptation made. To get one made that was not successful when it was like on the stage is even more so. I will just say that the lore behind Chicago is so fascinating.
Oh my God.
As I was doing research for this, I didn't realize that like the director wanted Kathy Bates instead of Queen Latifah. And Queen Latifah was fucking Weinstein's decision. And Toni Collette apparently was like, gave an incredible audition for the Roxy.
Roxy. That's
Roxy.
that's
the Renee Zellweger.
Yeah.
But they were like, she's too obscure. They needed someone more. And even though she was like, they were like, she killed the audition, she would be incredible. They just thought she wasn't mainstream enough, which fucking die, because I would have killed to see Toni Collette do that.
And she was also like on Broadway. Like that's when she was doing the Wild Party. Like,
yeah, hugely successful. I think it's a banger. Oh, also one last thing, little tidbit. Harvey Weinstein he hired Janet Jackson to write a new song for the end credits. And the people who wrote the music of Chicago were like, absolutely not.
I believe it's Kander and Ebb.
Yeah, Kander and Ebb. They were like, in our clause, it says no music that is not ours will be in this film.
Yeah.
And also he wanted to approach Britney Spears to have one of those little like cameo moments. Like, cause Maya's in it. Who's the Charlie's Angel, Lucy Liu's in it. Like those little brief moments. He wanted fucking Britney Spears. And
wow.
Other producers were like, that is one too far, that we will not do. But imagine Britney Spears is one of the gals who doing the Cell Block Tango.
Yeah. Wild.
Squish! Scissor lip shits. He had it coming. He had it coming. He only had himself to blame. If you'd have been there, if you'd have seen it, I bet you would have done the same. Squish! Scissor lip shits.
Wild. Okay, moving on. Because Chicago is such a banger and success, we get, I don't know, 10 plus years of people trying to recreate that magic. Phantom of the Opera in 2004, Producers 2005. We get Rent in 2005.
Sorry.
Which, you know, like, and they were like, I was reading an article about how like all these movie musical adaptations are like responses to criticism where it's like, oh, it's not faithful enough. And so Rent decided they're going to cast every single person who was in the original show except
about
for
42 years too late.
About 42 years late. And it's like, these are supposed to be like 20 somethings and they are all like mid 40s, except for Rosario Dawson, who replaced,
what is her name?
She's in The Heights.
Daphne Rubin Vega. Who was in the revival of Rocky Horror in the 2000s.
Yeah. So, I mean, Rent is Rent. You know, I guess it introduces America to Idina Menzel, which, cool for that, I guess.
We're hungry and frozen. Life we chosen. How we gonna pay? How we gonna pay? How we gonna pay last year's rent?
I have to say, like, this was my like peak high school era, and I was like, oh my god, musicals are so crazy and like important. Dreamgirls in 2006. Beyonce really trying her darndest just to get out hoofed by Jennifer Hudson. I think Eddie Murphy,
underrated.
Fire. Underrated. He's so good in this. We talked about Sweeney Todd in 2007. My God. The classic famous line of Attend the Tale of Sweeney Todd, and they don't even do the opening number of the show in the movie.
Nope.
This movie is Hot Topic, the movie, and it is just so... But like the show is funny and it's like energetic and like Helena Bonham Carter. Imagine singing "Have a Little Priest" with zero jokes. Imagine.
I know.
What is that?
It's priest. Have a little priest.
Is it really good?
So it's too good, at least. Then again, they don't commit sins of the flesh, so it's pretty fresh.
And I'm nodding along with everything you're saying because I feel the exact same way. And like, listen, I don't even hate it, but it's such a pale comparison to. I've seen 6 different versions of Sweeney Todd on stage, and each one, even the worst one, had more charisma than this movie has. It's just so unfair. Like, it feels like such a gutting of this film. And yeah, like, you know, like Johnny Depp can't sing the role. My favorite number in the musical is the quartet that occurs when they're doing the, like, you know, and I will marry her Sunday. No. And they don't do it because nobody could fucking sing it. They just skip over it. Like, they cast Alan Rickman and like,
nothing good. I think nothing good really happens in this movie. Hairspray that same year, which is fun. You know, you don't like it as much as I do, but it's fun.
You know, but like, by comparison to some of the things we're just talking about, it fucking slaps. So like,
the next year, Mamma Mia, we talked about. Also wanted to give a shout out to Repo, the genetic opera. In 2008, which is like, you know, we're experimenting. We're doing something a little crazy kooky.
I don't think it's perfect by any means by like applauding it, but I do. That's once again, like, I love watching, you know, sort of the stretch happen. And we're now in an era in which we're seeing more of that. There's a bunch of film adaptations. I'm going to let you continue on, but there's a bunch of film adaptations I watched of things that like I never heard of, like Sunshine on Leith, London Road, Hello Again, Been So Long, like these things. And I'll talk about them in a moment, but like, I like that there's these like little productions that are now getting, because you can do so much grander things on stage. And there's these productions that people would probably never see ever in their entire life.
Right. I think it's worth mentioning, like, at this time, we are now getting more, even though, they're mining the depths of the American Broadway, classics, like, we're getting smaller. I think Hedwig is a good example of this. Repo is a good example of this, where smaller things are like, what if we can find a bigger audience to put on bigger versions of the show by making a small movie? And I think the form is changing, and we're going to get to our next era in a little bit, and I think it's going to be very apparent in that era, especially.
Zydrate comes in a little glass vial.
A little glass vial?
And the little glass vial goes into the gun like a battery. And the Zydrate gun goes somewhere against your anatomy. And when the gun goes off, it sparks and you're ready for surgery.
To close out the millennial era, though, we get 9, which I fucking hate. I think
it's the worst.
It's directed by Rob Marshall, who did Chicago.
Mm-hmm. We're pushing up against that pin that I'm going to talk about. Like we're hitting that Chicago pin.
Yeah. Okay. Rob Marshall, we'll get back to you later. To close out this era, Les Miserables, which I think is half good, but mostly because of like some strong casting, and then also not good casting. Who keeps putting like Gerard Butler types in these musicals? Like, what is going on?
I don't know. Like,
who's the guy that plays Javert in this?
It's what's his face? Gladiator.
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe.
Like, I'm so sorry, but like Russell Crowe and fucking Gerard Butler, like you are very handsome men, and thank you for your action movies. I don't need you here. Your services are not needed. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And it's one of those things where like, I think it goes back to the Deborah Carr thing of like, these are preserved forever on film. Like,
has to be good.
Has to be fucking good. Like, truly.
And the last thing
you can do all of the fantasy stuff you want. You can do animated sequences in these movies, but like the singing, the reason that we're there, it has to, the singing, the dancing, they have to hit.
Yep. Last thing I'll mention is Rock of Ages, which I think is which I think is a good like segue into what I'm calling the new aughts era, because it is just like they were like, wait, what if we do musicals for like a middle America,
right.
And we have like all stars, like literally Mary J. Blige, Tom Cruise, Paul Giamatti, like Russell Brand, like wild.
It's genuinely just a trash movie. I mean, there's an entire gay panic musical number in which Russell Brand and Alec Baldwin realize they love each other, set to the tune of Can't Fight This Feeling Anymore. Just despicable.
And I can't fight this feeling anymore. I've forgotten what I started fighting for.
Okay, so the new aughts, like 2014-ish to now, Meryl Streep back at it again and Into the Woods. I love Into the Woods, the show.
I know you do. Yeah.
This movie is, again, I would say half good, half not. I think it's powered by the strength of like some really incredible songs.
I think it also is just in general hurt by the fact that it's a Disney movie and therefore like really
watered down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the sort of the edges I was talking about being sanded down for Grease, it's that for this as well too.
I also would mention that like, we haven't mentioned both Andrew Lloyd Webber and Stephen Sondheim as forces. They are kind of like Rodgers and Hammerstein of our generation, maybe not ours specifically, but like, the generation before. Stephen Sondheim specifically, his work is just really challenging. And I don't think it's not quite as cinematic and made for these adaptations. So there's a reason why we haven't seen like a company film or, a lot of his shows, Sun in the Park with George, they're not just made for that. And I don't think people are brave enough, have a vision enough to make those adaptations.
Oh yeah, because I would make a version of Assassins in a heartbeat. Like that's
imagine.
But like it would take such a concept.
Also in 2014, we got Jersey Boys, fucking directed by Clint Eastwood, which is crazy.
Maybe I will pull the pin now. I was kind of saving it for later. But I feel like Jersey Boys has triggered it. I think since Cabaret, people have been chasing Cabaret. And I think there are people who think there's only one way. And I think Chicago, even though I think Chicago's great and amazing, I think Chicago really takes the ideas of Cabaret where like the production numbers are production numbers and then the rest of the movie is not. And then also like bridges the gap, because the other thing is like, you know, I think I saw Gianmarco Cerezi, the comedian, arguing with people on Twitter about like, is Cabaret a musical? He's like, no, it's a play with songs. And no, it's a musical. And like part of it does bleed into each other. Money, the number I was talking about earlier, like starts with like a close up of Liza Minnelli doing her makeup. And she just looks in the mirror and says, money. And like, that's not on stage. Like, but that's part of the movie. That's part of what's occurring and, you know, I think because of Cabaret being so ingenious in the way that it balanced the two of both like really strong dramatics, like a really strong dramatic movie, and also these production numbers that push, I feel like everybody's sort of been chasing that ever since. And so there has been a bunch of copycats, some way more successful, like Chicago, but others less so. 9 being one of them, Jersey Boys being one of them, like where they just don't know how to integrate those two. Dreamgirls is a good example of one that is successful. Like Dreamgirls is, most of those musical numbers occur as production numbers. Some of them do bleed into the fantasy as well, but it works for that storytelling output. It doesn't always work in some of these other cases. So that's all I just wanted to say about that, because I think a lot of stuff a lot of the lineage of like the modern movie musical can be traced specifically back to the inflection point that is Cabaret.
Yeah, very well said. The last movie that came out in 2014, The Last 5 Years, which I haven't mentioned Anna Kendrick and her doings in this milieu, but she was in Into the Woods and The Last 5 Years. But like, I would say in this era specifically, we do not have a lot of good movie musical adaptations. Yeah. I would say we have more massive flops, both like artistically, commercially, etc. et al. Fucking Cats.
Yeah.
Disaster Hour.
Yeah, you still couldn't make me watch that. I'm sorry.
The Prom that went to Netflix. I saw that on Broadway.
So
Wonderful.
did I.
The Prom, the Netflix version, kind of horrendous, actually. In the Heights, which I'm sorry to all the girlies out there who love this movie, and there are a few. I think it's garbage mostly. Happy to discourse about that, but it's just, you know, I think that John Chu got lost in the like, we have to make a protest the Trump era musical when like that is not what the show's about. And it would have, if you would have believed in the story and the strength of the story, that in of itself would have been a stronger kind of like rebuke of the Trump administration. They pumped up like the character of Sonny at the detriment of the women, frankly. Like I was
horrible.
I was thinking about how come I don't like these women characters in this show, and I was like, oh, because they're not characters, they're not real humans. Like for a while I was like, oh, is Melissa Barrera like not good? And I was like, oh no, she's good. It's just like the character is dumb. Like she discovers fashion through like spray paint. Like it's
No, maybe I know. He'd never go out with a skank like that. Please tell me you're joking. Okay. Just wanted to see what you'd say. Tell me something I don't know.
Yeah. It's not it does not hit. It's not the one. Fucking Dear Evan Hansen that same year. The one bright spot is West Side Story, Spielberg's remake.
How can you make two but that's the thing, like you know, once again, it has to do with takes, and Spielberg honestly like truly understands that really thin line of like what is fantasy and what is reality. I think of the I Feel Pretty scene, and there's the part where she's in front of the mirror because they're all cleaning ladies in a clothing store. She's in front of the mirror. There are so many more mirrors than there would ever be in a clothing store, but it doesn't matter because it's a musical number. It's the fantasy of it. And it's what you can bring to the screen to like really enhance that. And Spielberg clearly gets it. And I understand why he says that he'll probably never make another musical because it's so hard. But I think that's, I do think it's hard. I do think you have to put your entire, you really got to weaponize that BFA to
you got to put that whole Spielberg gussy into.
I was trying to come up with one and I couldn't. So that's the.
No, I think West Side Story is like surgical precision of musical theater adaptation excellence.
Yeah.
Whereas something like In the Heights is just like ER torture, like, fucking slapdash nonsense. To close us out, Matilda on Netflix. 13 the musical, which is Ariana Grande's debut back in Kevin. Also on Netflix.
I didn't watch it. I was going to, which is also Jason Robert Brown.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
So it has some pedigree. And then these last two things, very whatever. The Color Purple, which we talked about last year, I think has all the right pieces except for, I guess, I don't know, the cinematography, lighting. I mean, Fantasia is incredible in it.
We've now regressed into this era of like being ashamed of admitting, and that's why it was nice to see Wicked be like, no, this is a musical. Like, it's fine that this is a musical. But like Color Purple, the Mean Girls movie.
Mean Girls is the last one on my list. And like, yes, you're exactly right. This era of, in Dear Evan Hansen was sold as like Oscar baity, whatever. No word of like it being a musical, not sold that way. The shame factor is back. And really, I think to the detriment of the form. But yeah, I mean, now we're at Wicked. We'll talk about what's coming next after in the fast forward. But like a really brief, condensed, you kind of like zippity, zoppity run through the different eras of musicals. A lot we missed, I'm sure. A lot that we didn't watch. But like doing this mostly was just like, oh, fuck, I really, actually do want to go see, Pal Joey, or I really do want to go see that 63 version of Bye Bye Birdie.
That's the sort of thing that I hope people take away from this episode is that like I think there is in the public consciousness like a very specific like corridor of what a movie musical is,
Right.
And I think there's so many different things, and like obviously we've said many times, like it relies on the talent behind the screens and the talent on screen, and there's so many different ways to put together a musical. But I think very similar to all the other sort of mini genres, like there is a musical for you out there, even if you don't think you've found it, because it's so sort of distressing when people are like, oh, like I don't like musicals, and it's like, well, I'm sure there's a musical you like it just
100%.
But we'll, like you said, we'll talk more about that in the fast forward.
Okay, Gavin, let's get into our picks, and we'll start off with our 1-star reviews.
Do you want me to go lay first?
Yes, please, Gavin. What do you got? What's your 1-star review?
So there was a lot I could have picked from. I will be honest. There were some clunkers in here, and I think that's part of the whole thing is that as I was just saying, I think people think of musicals as a very strict sort of thing, and I think the worst thing you can do is make a movie musical that is like very strictly just one thing. So my 1-star review is actually going to be one that we didn't talk about, which is 1970's The Song of Norway, or just Song of Norway.
Okay.
Song of Norway is based off of a very popular operetta, all set to the music of Edvard Grieg. Edvard Grieg was a classical composer from Norway, and he really wanted basically to become the most famous composer out of Norway, and congratulations, he succeeds. And that's also the plot of the musical, is that Edvard Grieg is this annoying man who wants nothing more than to be the most popular composer out of Norway. And everything in the movie is funneled through how can we help this man become the most popular. And listen, Grieg's music, great. You've heard some of it in the Hall of the Mountain King. That's Grieg.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what Song of Norway is 142 minutes about a man who doesn't struggle that much.
Right, sure.
And everyone else in the movie wants nothing more than to see him succeed, including his wife, played by Florence Henderson, who I should also mention is also his cousin.
Ah,
Yeah. But it's cool. Like, they're not going to make a big deal out of it. They're just going to be like,
Right,
wow,
right,
these
right.
two love each other. And it's so long and so boring. And it was created, speaking of not having a take, in order to capitalize on the success of Sound of Music. Sound of Music, you know, like you said, was at that tail end of like what people thought of the movie musical and the popularity. And so they thought, great, snowy mountains, like these languid musical pieces. Like, it has none of the charm, none of the, you know, one of the reviews at the contemporary reviews at the time said, you know, it's not Edvard Grieg's fault that he didn't face any resistance from the Nazis, because like there's just no struggle in the movie. There's no tension at any point. And in order to like pad, there are so many shots of just Norway, just in between musical numbers, just still shots of mountains,
Wow.
still shots of boats.
Look at this. Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe the most interesting part, I mean, there's a lot of production numbers, but they're like, the choreography's not good. Everybody looks insane. They do in the Hall of the Mountain King, which also I should mention, like, all of the lyrics in the movies are added lyrics to these pre-existing composed pieces. So they do in the Hall of the Mountain King, and it's the story he's telling to these children. Why? I don't know, because we need to add more to our 140-minute movie. And
we need to add something in here, guys. It's a little too short for us.
And they do a scene where the children are running away from animated trolls. And I was like, why are we in animation now? And I was like, the animation looks great, but like, what are we doing? Like, what is happening? So yeah, It's just very long and very hard to sit through. And the one interesting bit I will give is that Florence Henderson is such a sitcom girly, and everything else in the movie is so earnest that almost every line by her is delivered like she's being a big bitch. Like, because she has that sort of sarcastic, that like, you know, the Brady Bunch style of delivering lines, like, oh, you know, but everybody else is playing it so straight that it's just like, she just seems so mean throughout the entire movie. And she's supposed to be like really lovely and light, you know, but yeah, Song of Norway.
It's a rare pick where it's like not just bad, but also fucking boring.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really not worth any, you know, I hate being like, don't ever watch this movie, but also like, I don't know, there's you can spend your 3 hours or 2.5 hours doing something else. I promise.
As the unpaling light of the Norway sun, the sun that shines in the night. One there was who roamed these hills and thought his thoughts, no one to share them. Till that time he told them all to one he knew, able to dare them.
Good pick, Kevin. For my pick, I mean, like you said, there's a lot here, but I think I went with the thing that disappointed me the most. And this is unfair because obviously I haven't seen the Broadway versions or, you know, stage versions of all these movies, but I don't care. My 1-star review is going to 2007's Sweeney Todd. It is just astounding. For, you know, I was also reading, I forgot to mention, Stephen Sondheim famously also was just like, no, you guys, no adaptations, no, not for me. So it's wild that he was like, he said, Tim Burton, you know what, gal? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Do that.
I mean, and I think it makes it even worse that he actually consulted on the
yes,
the soundtrack.
And he gave his approval to the vision of Tim Burton. You know, Johnny Depp and everyone else, because they're not fucking singers, took vocal lessons, and still this is what we, you know, ended up with. Tim Burton, like, apparently had been wanting to do a adaptation for years. He saw Sweeney Todd like in London, I think, and was like, oh my god, like he became obsessed with it, which makes sense. It's a macabre, show, lots of blood, lots of like kind of horror elements. And so for a long time, he wanted to adapt it. He approached Sondheim like in the 80s.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah. And nothing came of it. Nothing like, Sondheim was like, oh, well, I'm busy doing a bunch of coke and making my own shit.
I mean, correct.
Yeah. Being gay. Sam Mendes for a while was developing a version that kind of he asked in 2003 Sondheim, and he was like, no. So like there was a lot of like developmental, slow turning things. Sam Mendes finally got approval, but left in 2005 to go film Jarhead.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And so Burton came on, and he was like, I'm gonna rework this script. I'm gonna put my little magic fairy dust on it. And they wanted to like, compact everything in. Obviously, the show is long. I just like there's a weird meta thing of like, I guess there's like a lots of chopping of people up in the show. So they chopped up, all the songs. They're shortened, others are removed. I would say, I don't know, like the main relationship in this show is the two children.
Yeah.
Not Lovett, and I don't know what version Tim Burton saw, but it's like, does he understand what this show's about? Does he understand like there's none of the humor, there's none of the like kind of wicked acidiness to it. It's just all so dour and so like languorous. And also like, I'm not saying that all those actors are bad actors, but like Tim Burton, like fucking take a pill, dude. Like you do not need to cast all your friends in your movies.
I know.
Like, do you care about this? Really? Do you really care about, putting on this show is rock and roll. Okay. And like this movie is just like, it's almost like he was like blood. They cast a lot of newcomers in the smaller roles. The Joanna was a nobody.
Yeah.
The Toby was a nobody, which is fine. But like, again, I need, like, I really do think like, listen, Cats was very bad, but getting Taylor Swift to be in it, that kind of rips.
Yeah.
Like,
I completely agree. Regardless of how you feel about Taylor Swift, I agree. And that's, and by making Joanna and Anthony so forgettable, like you said, like
nothing.
Yeah. They're huge parts of the show. I mean, Joanna has, the like little bird song is so complicated. And yeah.
Wake up, Joanna. Another bright red day. We learn, Joanna, to say.
I just don't understand. Like, they sucked everything out of the show. I just don't think Tim Burton got it. I think it's ugly to look at, not fun. It fails on every front. I think the world is not well built. I think he's just more interested in his own style, and instead of these actors trying to form their way around this world, they formed the world around these actors, which I think is just like a huge mistake. So yeah, Sweeney Todd. What were other things you did not like? I know that there were others.
I feel bad slamming it because it is such a small movie, but Hello Again, which is a based off of a musical that I think not a lot of people have seen, and it's based off of La Ronde, the novel, and it's all duets. And it's all about sex and whatnot. And Audra McDonald herself is in it, and she's really great, but it's one of those where yes, great, you've made a movie out of your weird movie musical. Tell me why. Like, why did I sit through this? Like, what was your vision? What was the point? And I think the other one that like really stuck out to me that I really was not a huge fan of, besides Dear Evan Hansen, which once again, the problem is that there's just no take on it. Sunshine on Leith was really bad too. It's a musical based off of a jukebox musical from the music of the Pretenders.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so of course the final number is the big like I would walk 500, but done as like a big musical number, and I was like, what am I watching?
And I would walk 500 miles, and I would walk 500 more, just to be the one who walks 1,000 miles to fall down at your door.
But funny enough, George McKay is in that, and George McKay is also in a new musical this year called The End, and he was also in another adaptation called Been So Long, and I was just like, have I been sleeping on George McKay? Is he like a big theater girly?
He's a secret theater girly.
And then finally, Finian's Rainbow, which is the Francis Ford Coppola 1968 adaptation. It's just so racist, and it's interesting to watch the like, because half of it's shot on soundstage, half of it's shot on real location. You're watching like new Hollywood fighting old Hollywood and really trying to, but like there's a whole subplot where like a racist senator gets turned black, and it's just a white guy in black makeup, and
wow,
and like I was just like, can we not do this? Yeah.
I'm gonna reiterate that I hate 9.
Yes.
I'm gonna reiterate In the Heights I really do not like, because it is such a fucking disappointment. I love that show. I think they did a disservice to that. And then also I'm going to mention a funny thing happened on the way to the forum, which I didn't bring up earlier. This came out in 1966. So we needed to put the Coke down. We really did, because it is so weird and so bizarre. But like not fun. It's Americans trying to be Monty Python is what it is. Which is always a mistake. So there is that. All right, Gavin, let's get into our 5-star reviews. What do you got?
I feel like I tipped my hat earlier to this, and I feel like I tipped my hat on our Blue Sky to this, but I think there has been no other genre-defining musical that hits like all of the quadrants for me since Cabaret. And I just think everything that occurs in Cabaret is so good. It's so adult and so funny. The musical numbers are so well done, and so like, and it's also genuinely fucking scary at points. There's some moments of true horror, specifically because they come from the reality of the horror that was what was happening at the end of Weimar Germany as it transitioned into Nazi Germany. For those who don't know, Cabaret is it's based off of a play from 1951 called I Am Camera, which in turn is based off the 1939 Christopher Isherwood novel Goodbye to Berlin. Christopher Isherwood was a gay man who moved to Berlin from London. In this film, you have American performer Sally Bowles, who I believe in the play is British and then reversed for the Christopher Isherwood character. But anyways, she's a performer at the Kit Kat Club in 1931. She meets new British arrival to the city, Brian Roberts, and he moves in with her in a boarding house. And a lot of it is like the sort of adventures they get up to while living in this boarding house together as roommates. And there's all these subplots. He's trying to teach this heiress English, and she falls in love with this other man. You have the master of ceremonies who runs all the musical numbers of the Kit Kat Club, which you don't really get to know him very well. And then all of this is played in the background of the Nazis rising to power in Germany. There's this scene towards the very beginning where the owner of the Kit Kat Club throws some Nazis out by being like, we don't allow uniforms in here, and then immediately gets beaten in the street by them.
Yeah.
And that keeps happening to characters throughout the movie. All the while, also, Brian and Sally both fall in love with this very rich man, and they form this kind of bisexual triad.
Yes.
She gets pregnant and she's convinced herself it's Brian's, and this man kind of like dumps them to the side because he's rich upper class. Like they're just playthings for him. He's not.
Yeah.
So there's also abortion in this movie. There's I think maybe my favorite scene, and funny enough, it's a scene with a dubbing in it, is he takes them to this picnic in the countryside and this boy starts singing this very nationalistic song, Tomorrow Belongs to Me. And as the camera pulls out, it's revealed that that boy is a Hitler Youth. And people in the crowd start standing up and singing it with him. And you can see some of the older people in the crowd, how uncomfortable it makes them and how they're not. And it's a truly horrifying moment of just seeing this crowd of people singing this very nationalistic song.
Oh, motherland, motherland, show us the sign. Your children have waited to see. The morning will come when the land is mine. Tomorrow belongs, tomorrow belongs, tomorrow belongs to me.
And Brian and this rich man and Sally leaving, and Brian's just kind of like, oh, you really think you can control these people? You think it's going to be, and so like, it's just this slow descent into fascism as these people are just trying to live their lives. Sounds familiar. Sounds like might have some reflections in our current reality. Who knows? And yeah, it's just really gorgeous. I think the musical numbers are great. This is the music itself is by is Candor and Ebb, just like Chicago. And so it's got like a lot
bangers.
of
Bangers.
Exactly. And this is another where like, so Money and another song aren't from the show. They're new shows written by Candor and Ebb. They've now been added to the show. They don't do Don't Tell Mama, which I think is the only other number that's like really gotten big from the show that's not in the movie. But yeah, it's so good to watch. I think Bob Fosse's direction is so tight. His vision is so clear. His choreography is so good and so crisp. Like I mentioned before, I'm a fucking choreography girly. Like I love watching them do those syncopated weird arm movements, the hand movements, because once again, when you're fucking dancing, it's not just what's happening below the waist. It's about what's happening above the waist as well, too. He absolutely gets that. And I think he just really understood filmic language versus stage language. I think if Bob Fosse had directed a version of Chicago on stage, or a version of Cabaret on stage, it wouldn't have looked anything like this.
Yeah.
He would have chosen something different. I don't mean to slam current productions because I have not seen the newest production. I'm not planning on seeing the newest production because I've seen clips from it and I'm just like, they're just screaming. But I have heard the newest production ends with the Master of Ceremonies becoming a Nazi. And I think that's a wild misread of this material, because the fear isn't people becoming the thing that they hate. The fear is the thing that hates them destroying them.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a gross, like, no, that's not who the Master of Ceremonies is. That's not the point. Like, he wouldn't thrive in there. He would never, there's no situation which that man, that very faggy man.
You're reaching your honor.
Yeah. So yeah, I think Cabaret is really brilliant. So stylish. And, I could watch it all the time. Maybe this time. Preach. It's the fucking best.
Yeah. I would just add, like, Liza.
And she's so, when I was watching it this time, the other thing I was thinking about her is like clearly classical beauty. Like she asked her father, Vincent Minnelli, one of the greatest musical directors of all time, film, movie adaptations of musicals, what she should go for, he was the one who told her Louise Brooks, like, do Louise Brooks, do the bob, do the, like the, like, that's what, but then also just watching the movie, she's so fucking 1972 punk rock. Like she's timeless in the film. She has this both like real classic quality and also just like if you threw her in like ripped up jean jacket and like band t-shirt, it wouldn't change anything about it. It's just so fucking punk rock, the entire performance. It's so good. Yeah, Liza's amazing.
Yeah. Excellent pick, Kevin. I struggled a lot with this. There's I love all my children. Everyone knows that I'm obsessed with West Side Story, and I think both of those films are masterpieces. But in a surprising twist, my 5-star review is going to 1965's Sound of Music. It's funny that you picked Cabaret and I'm picking this, both musicals about like the impending horrors of fucking Nazi Germanism. Yeah. Number one, I had never seen Sound of Music the whole way through.
Oh, wow. It's long. I get it. And once again, you said you didn't grow up with, like, I remember, as you mentioned, this is our quote unquote holiday show. Like, I remember watching it so much during the holidays as a children because my sister Nicole really loved Sound of Music.
It's 174 minutes, directed by Robert Wise. And again, I just have to like emphasize that like Cabaret, brilliant world building, ripping star in Liza, banging songs. This has the same thing. Like ripping star in Julie Andrews, who just is beyond magnetic, beautiful, funny, accessible. She is able, the way that she's able to stand up to the captain and like give it back to him. It's so like precise, but it's like never mean, never cruel. She's, how do we solve a problem like Maria? Like you fucking, you don't, okay? You live with that. It's just like, again, also very beautiful. The colors, I mean, like those Nazi flags are a red that we do not see on film anymore.
Yeah.
And when he pulls it down and rips it up, like it's just so cinematic. And I've never seen a Sound of Music production on stage. I can't even imagine how they would do it. There's enormous buildings, fields, so many sets in the show. I can't imagine it. And it's because Robert Wise has built out this entire world and is using all of the best parts of film to take us into a new world, right? I kind of like, I bemoan or feel badly about like new movie musical adaptations that are kind of like, oh, well, just like CGI on the cheap, whatever.
Right.
And you can like feel that energy, kind of like it's like so. Even in like Oklahoma, which again, I'm sure there are backdrops they just made, but like that is art that someone is making.
Right.
Like you can feel the humanness there, and it's actually transportive. Like no one is like, oh wow, we're in fucking Shiz or like, Munchkin Land. Like,
and what's frustrating about those is like, those are physical sets. That comes down to John M. Chu's bad direction, but that's neither here to, I mean, you can't say that on the internet because everybody will jump you, but like, I don't think it's the most brilliantly directed film I've ever seen. But I mean, when you were saying that, the red flag that I was seeing was Into the Woods, because there's so much just cheap, gross CG and Into the Woods.
Yeah, I think John M. Chu is a good example, though. Also, like, he knows spectacle and bombast, but like, it never feels particularly smart.
Yeah.
I think In the Heights, I hate to be that fucking guy, but like every level of that, I'm like, I hate this, looks bad, sounds bad. But anyway, Sound of Music is so smart and is so like, and is able to, as I was watching it, I was like, this fucking stands the test of time. And like you said, much like Cabaret, speaks to the now. It speaks to like this impending thing and how are we going to resist. This show is different in that like it's not, a big spectacle kind of musical. There's not like a billion dancers.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. Like the production numbers are the fucking kids. Like that's that they're the chorus.
Yeah, it's the kids, and it's Julie Andrews emoting her face off.
When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad.
But it's just lovely, and I think also there's the character. He's like the director of the little musical group.
Yeah.
I was thinking about like he is the guy who like doesn't want to do anything. He is the centrist of who's like, we can get along with the Nazis.
Yep.
We just got, and I'm like, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
and again, I just couldn't believe how captivated I was by this show that people kind of like have poked fun at, for it is very sweet. It is very, precious. But like the Rodgers and Hammerstein songs are undeniable. They have stuck around, become classics for a reason. Julie Andrews, one of our greatest to ever do it. There's a reason why it is iconic for a reason.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that there are. I think also, like you were saying with Cabaret, these are like the blueprints of why something like Spielberg's West Side Story is as good as it is. And we the mountain top of like, adaptations, like these are the base. This is the foundation. And the girls don't make them like this anymore. I tell you that.
That is very true. That's very true. Part of it is playing with that artificiality, like you were talking about. Like it's just so lush and so, but it's not real, but it feels real because that's what the film is telling you is,
It feels like a new world that they have made. And so even though it doesn't look like exactly 100% real, it doesn't matter because this reality where people sing and dance and like we can express ourselves in these big cathartic ways, like it is otherworldly. So why wouldn't the world feel that way as well?
Was there anything else that you saw that you particularly liked?
I think Fiddler on the Roof bangs.
Oh my God, so good.
What else? I think I do think Chicago, like obviously is very good. I think Dreamgirls is very good and gets like kind of like played dust sometimes. Is there anything?
I want to give a real quick shout. The second one I watched for this was the Bells Are Ringing, and it's another one of those like kind of suffers towards the end because it's like maybe one less musical number would have helped pacing a little bit. But I want to give the shout out specifically to Judy Holliday, who was maybe one of our most brilliant female comedic talents on screen. She made this movie when she was 40, and it was the last film she made because she died of cancer not too long after that. And it's a real damn shame because she's so good in it. And so like, yeah, and there's so many other, like, obviously, like, we talked about Rocky Horror. We talked, all these things that I love, but like, I really tried to stick to some of the things that I, was seeing for the first time and there's a bunch of stuff I didn't even mention because we can't mention everything. We just truly can't.
Yeah. I watched On the Town for the first time and I was just like, isn't my favorite thing, but like, no, but like seeing Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra just like, be amazing.
I watched this Canadian adaptation of this very small musical called Jacques Brel is Alive and Well and Living in Paris, and it didn't blow me away, but there's some cool stuff in it because it almost feels like music video stringed together. And they got Jacques Brel about 3 years before he died to perform in the middle of the movie. Wow. And so that's really cool and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. Once again, it's one of those things where like there is a musical for you. There is, like they're out there and they exist, and you just like it just all depends on the execution, honestly.
Yeah. Also quickly, we talked about Grease in our Living in John episode. If you want to hear more about that. Grease
but once again,
iconic.
It's no Grease 2.
It's no Grease 2. And thank goodness for that, is what I gotta say. But okay, Gavin, let's do our mixed reviews review, and then we can get out of here.
My 1-star review was 1970's Song of Norway.
My 1-star review was 2007's Sweeney Todd.
And my 5-star review was 1972's Cabaret.
And my 5-star review was 1965's The Sound of Music.
Oh boy. All right. Let's get all singing, all dancing as we head to the fast forward. One singular sensation.
Every little step she takes, doodle diddle.
I've had this thought since we started doing this episode. And obviously, like, we're an American podcast. We're mostly talking about American stuff. Do we think that audiences nowadays have the appropriate sort of suspension of disbelief to make musicals work? Because I think, like, once again, Wicked is one thing, and we're going to talk about Wicked. Now we're talking about Wicked, because Wicked is a fantasy no matter what. So it sort of doesn't matter if they burst into song or not. But things like The Color Purple, the Mean Girls musical, which by the way is trash.
Mean Girls musical is bad.
It's so bad. And like
Mean Girls musical, the movie is bad. Mean Girls the musical is fine.
I didn't see it, but the movie version is awful. It's one of those things where, like, I think they were hiding that they were musicals because, I mean, I just think about those videos that were going around of, like,
people groaning
at, like, the 5th song into Mean Girls, like, and I just think that they're, like, I don't know how to fix it. I don't know, like, what the recourse is, but I just think that, like, there is something in this post-irony United States that, like, doesn't allow us to accept the idea that somebody would burst into song.
Well,
I mean, the press tour for Joker 2, like, not that Joker 2 is, like, based on it, but you literally had them being like, no, it's not a musical. It's just when they can't, when they
express themselves.
Yeah. They burst into song, and it's like, that's what a musical is. Like,
right. I think, again, I mean, Mean Girls is a good example of this, where it's like, there was no world building there.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Like, there can be reality-based shows that are not high concept, but, like, it has to have, like, Amelia Perez is not based on,
right,
whatever, but, like, that is a reality-based show, normal humans doing whatever, but, like, there is so much style and there's a take there. You and I both did not, like, particularly love Amelia Perez,
right?
But I have to respect that the director had a point of view. There is style, and I know I am in reality, but I am in this new world that he has created. And I think, like, same can be said for Sound of Music. Same can be said for Cabaret. They're not fucking aliens. They're not, like, living in Munchkin Land.
Right.
These are normals, on the
Chicago,
town. Yeah. And I don't think there's two things happening. I think, number one, directors or producers are not pushing hard enough to create these worlds. And number two, like you said at the top of this episode, Americans are not consuming or appreciating art.
Yes.
And so,
can I tell you, I went to see Wicked. I used our Alamo Pass. During the daytime, they have, like, children's shows, so they're a little more relaxed on, like, yelling at people for talking.
Yeah.
No one talked in my, like, no child. There were children there. No child talked, but an adult man with his daughter answered his phone 3 times. Just fully answered his phone.
Heinous.
And I was, like, thinking about, like, is it because he can't recognize that, like, regardless of how you feel about Wicked, I didn't love it, but, like, there was art on screen in front of him, and we were all there to enjoy it.
Yeah, I think, like, Mean Girls I did not like, but if you cannot recognize that Renee Rapp can sing her freaking face off, like, and has charm, like, what's going on here? And so I think, like, Hairspray, I think, is a good example of this also. That shit opens up with Good Morning Baltimore. We know immediately Tracy Turnblatt is, this larger-than-life character. Everyone is kind of like, the world is being built for us.
Yeah.
And is settling you into this idea of, like, oh, this is what's happening. And so we can't go into Dear Evan Hansen or Mean Girls the musical where it's like, doop, doop, doop. I'm just, like, a regular high school person. And then, like, out of nowhere, like I'm singing and like what is the how am I the viewer
Right.
supposed to sit into this? What is going on? And so I think there needs to be better direction, better points of view, better positioning of these films, period. Because I know that Fantasia ate that in
Yeah.
Color Purple, but like I don't think it's a great movie.
Right.
But like it's just yes, Gavin, to your point, like I don't think there is enough space for audiences to get
Right.
that whimsy. And I think someone was mentioning like online how there's Bollywood, which we didn't even touch at all.
No, exactly, yeah.
Like those films are all gorgeous, beautiful spectacles, and they set you up like I mean RRR is not an adaptation of anything, but like tons of musical numbers, high impact, building a world. We know that these are just like normal humans, but like it is a spectacle, which goes back to the very beginning of what these are supposed to be, spectacles.
Right, exactly. And it's funny, I was just thinking about when you talking about setting up, I think it's also, once again, going back to the idea that there's two nearly perfect versions of West Side Story that you can watch, but thinking about the different ways in which they start Robert Wise starts you in the streets during the like do and the like whistling, and Spielberg's like, actually no, I'm gonna start you in the destruction of them tearing down the streets, and it's two wildly different takes, but both really inform you of the environment that you're going to be immersed in.
Welcome to this world where let it go, Elsa. We are going to be like going places. I am excited for there have already been planned for other musical movie adaptations coming soon. I believe Jennifer Lopez's Kiss from a Spider Woman is coming out.
Yeah, it's going to play Sundance this year.
Yeah, which very excited for. Her and Diego Luna together. It will also be interesting to see like the Wicked effect. I think Wicked, people love it. I think it's good. I don't think it's like amazing. I think it's good. I think it's better than the show. Honestly, I think the Broadway show is like, what the fuck?
I will say this, just a sidebar on Wicked. So the music for the movie is like really lush and big. And then the musical numbers, it's back to like dinky keyboard. And I was like, like, we didn't want to reorchestrate this for an orchestra. Like, I understand, but like, we're not doing this 8 days or 8 shows a week. Like we can have a full orchestra for.
Listen, getting Ariana and her boyfriend a lot of money, so couldn't do that. And I think they both are good. I think
yes, and that, because I think I liked it less than you, but I do want to say that like. Cynthia fucking melting faces off of it, but not just that. Like she's also really good in the moment she has to act, and she has to. I think that Ariana's good. And this is not a knock on her. I don't think the role of Glinda's ever been written to be great, and so like that's she's doing her best with what she was given.
I struggle because I think like for me, like Megan Hilty, Kristen Chenoweth version of it.
I saw Megan Hilty when I saw Wicked. Megan Hilty was my Glinda, and she was fucking unhinged, and it was so good.
I think like they are both. Kristen and Megan are really good examples of physical comedians.
Yeah,
Annalie Ashford, like I think that's exactly what you need. I think Ariana's good. I don't think she's all the way there, but like she's a singer who she's a theater girly, but like
there's certain scenes where she's like doing Pitch Perfect Chenoweth, and like I kind of wish she had more of a concept than that, but like I'll give her that. I was like, oh, she's so good at impressions. So like,
100%. So it'll be interesting to see. Like number one, we're getting the second part next year. Number two, what shenanigans is this gonna cause for other musicals to come our way?
I know.
I think Wicked is a hard example though, because it is based off of IP that people already knew. So it's not hard to sell like, oh, it's the Wicked Witch, like, Wizard of Oz. So it has that going for it. Number two, it's been on Broadway for a very long time. So there are not a lot of shows like Wicked, period. I don't think that there's like going to be, you can't look to Broadway right now and be like, well, what can we grab? Like,
right.
Nothing, it doesn't exist. So I don't know what they could go looking for to find. Like, are we gonna get the Book of Mormon movie? Like,
Right.
that kind of like maybe fits the bill, but also maybe not too political. I don't know. Also, the show's kind of a little bit racist.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's also aged really poorly in the like.
Wicked is not a good story. Period. It survived on the strength of banger songs.
Yeah.
Banger songs that, like Rodgers and Hammerstein, made their way into the popular consciousness. And so and there's just not a lot of musicals that do that today.
Yeah.
And I don't there are certainly musicals that we have long forgotten that perhaps would be ripe for adaptation. But I don't think there's anything like, they fucking made The Prom
Yeah.
a year after it was on.
And it like came and went. It's interesting that you would say that too, because I'm trying to think of something that like really captured the zeitgeist as hardcore as Rent did. And then obviously like we talked about that movie's kind of a disaster because it's just like a bad adaptation. But like, gasp.
I just gasped so hard because we forgot to talk about Tick Tick Boom.
I knew I've actually been sitting and like I was like, I wonder if he's gonna bring up Tick Tick Boom. And I like Tick Tick Boom. So I'm not like, but like I was like, we ran out of time. But yeah, Tick Tick Boom's a great adaptation of a show that's mostly just a guy sitting at a piano. So
yeah,
like,
I love that movie. Andrew Garfield, yes. All the things, yes. Lin-Manuel Miranda paying for his crimes. Thank God.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've heard other things that are coming down the pipeline of adaptations, but I'm sure they're coming. They did Matilda. Matilda was like a medium success, so they did Matilda.
But once again, the last two you've mentioned, The Prom and Matilda, where did they go?
Netflix.
Yeah,
fucking
both
Netflix.
went to Netflix. So
yeah, and also I think like, unfortunately, I think In the Heights did not do well commercially.
Right.
Of course, there was a pandemic thing happening with that as well.
Just a small thing.
I think West Side Story also didn't do as much money making as it wanted to. And I think the lessons that they learned from that, and I say they, I mean executives, was we need to hire Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. Because both of those were not like, originally, like years ago, they wanted Jennifer Lopez in The Heights. And that makes sense. I get that. She like aged out of those roles, and they made In the Heights that they wanted with like, nobodies really. Like Anthony Ramos was maybe the most famous person in that movie. And like, even he's not a household name. And I'm not saying that need to be, but like, I think the lesson that people took was like, oh, we need stars.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think that's, it's interesting. I don't know what the future holds for the movie musical, especially the adaptation of, but yeah, it does feel like it needs to, it's just not easy. It's just not easy. And I feel like so many directors try and take the easy way out, and it just doesn't,
Yeah, it's not easy. It never will be easy. And if you think you can take the easy way out, you're fooling yourself. I mean, like, it exhausted Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
And Spielberg was working with like some of the sturdiest material. Like, so don't do it, gal. If you don't if you don't got the juice, don't go squeezing, okay? But I'll just say I love movie musicals. I think they are great holiday. Like, if you're gonna sit down with your family to watch something, like, sit down with your mom and be like, isn't Cynthia Erivo crazy? Like, isn't this crazy? like, and they're challenging, they're fun, funny. Some of them are scary. And the good ones just stand the test of time. And so, I think there's no better way, I think, than to spend the holidays and getting cozy with one of these good movie musicals.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think. Absolutely. Sorry. As I turn into a speedboat.
So why don't you go home and watch Hedwig and the Angry Inch with your mom?
With your mom.
That won't be weird at all.
Remember, 6 inches forward, 5 inches back.
Exactly.
But if you enjoyed this episode this holiday season, you can always find us online and tell us about it. Or if there's any movie musicals that are specifically adapted from a show that we missed, please feel free to tell us. We are on Blue
Let
Sky.
us know. Let us know.
We're on Blue Sky at The Mixed Reviews.
We're on Facebook. Just type in The Mixed Reviews.
You can email us, write us a little note, just like Della did, at reviewsmixed@gmail.com.
We're on Instagram at _mixed_reviews.
And if you want to listen to our back catalog like you just listened to this epic movie musical length episode, you can find all of that on any major podcast app. We're on Apple, Spotify, Audible, and then whatever one you listen to us on, stop by, give us a 5-star rating, write us a little review, and we'll read it on the show.
Yeah, we so appreciate all your little love notes. So keep them coming.
Absolutely.
This is our last show of the year. Our next episode will be our annual year in review episode. So yeah, stay safe. Happy holidays. We love you all. Thank you for listening.
Check out glitterjaw.com.
And join our Patreon if you can, if you would like to. $5 for all the things.
All the things.
We're on there. Thank you so much.
Bye.
There are giants in the sky.
Wunderbar, wunderbar.
There's no business like show business like no business I know. Everything about it is appealing. Everything the traffic will allow. Nowhere could you get that happy feeling when you are stealing that extra.